I, 28F, found out last month that I was adopted and my whole life had been a lie. I grew up as an only child with my parents Mark, 58M, and Sarah, 56F, in a fairly normal middle-class household in Michigan. We weren't super rich, but we weren't struggling either. My dad worked as an accountant at a big firm and my mom was a high school teacher. My childhood was pretty good. I had everything I needed, my parents supported my education, and I never felt unloved. Growing up, I always noticed that I didn't look much like either of my parents. They both had blonde hair and blue eyes while I had dark hair and brown eyes. My mom used to joke that I was her mini carbon copy of my grandmother, my dad's mom, who had passed away when I was a baby. They even had these old black and white photos of her with dark hair and eyes that they would show me whenever I asked about it. Looking back now, I realize those photos could have been of anyone. They were so old and grainy you could barely make out the features. Every time we had biology class in school and learned about genetics, I would come home confused about how I got such different features from my parents. They always had an explanation ready. They said their grandparents had dark features, and these things sometimes skip generations. I believed them because why wouldn't I? They were my parents and I trusted them completely. When I was 16, I had to do a family medical history project for school. My parents were weirdly vague about everything. They kept saying things like our family was blessed with good health and there wasn't much to report. When I pressed for more details, my dad got irritated and said some families just don't keep track of these things. I remember feeling embarrassed in class when I had the shortest family medical history presentation. Last month changed everything. My parents decided they wanted to downsize since they were getting closer to retirement age. They planned to sell our childhood home and move to a smaller condo. Mom asked me to help her clean out the attic since there were decades of stuff stored up there. While she was going through old clothes, I was sorting through boxes of paperwork and photos. That's when I found it, a thick manila envelope stuffed behind some photo albums in a dusty box marked old tax papers. Inside were adoption papers from an agency in California. The papers showed I was adopted when I was 6 months old. But that wasn't all. There were dozens of letters from someone named Maria, my biological mother. The letter started from when I was a baby and continued until I was around 5. She wrote about how much she missed me, how she hoped I was doing well, and how she looked forward to maybe meeting me someday when I was older. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely read the letters. Everything started making sense, why I looked so different, why they were always vague about family history, why we moved states when I was young. I confronted my parents right there in the attic. Instead of apologizing or trying to explain, they got defensive. Mom started crying and saying I was never supposed to find those papers. Dad got angry and started yelling about how they were my real parents, not some teenager who gave me up. When I asked why they never told me, they said they had planned to tell me when I turned 18 but were afraid I would reject them and try to find my biological parents. The more they talked, the angrier I got. They admitted they moved from California to Michigan when I was 5 specifically to make sure my biological mother couldn't find us. They had received letters and photos from her through the adoption agency for years but hid them all because they were scared she would try to steal me back. They even made up that whole story about my grandmother looking like me and probably doctored those old photos. I couldn't believe they had maintained this lie for 28 years. Every time I questioned my appearance, every time I asked about family history, every time I wondered why we moved states, they had looked me in the eye and lied. They didn't just hide the truth, they actively created elaborate stories and fake evidence to keep me from discovering it. I was so upset I could barely breathe. I grabbed the envelope with all the papers and left immediately. My dad tried to stop me, saying those were their private documents, but I told him they were about me and my biological mother so they belonged to me. I drove straight to my best friend Emma's apartment. She helped me go through all the papers and letters that night. My parents started calling and texting nonstop as soon as I left. The messages ranged from angry, how dare I take their private papers, to guilt-tripping, after everything they did for me, this is how I repay them, to begging, please come home so we can explain everything. I couldn't deal with any of it. Everything I thought I knew about myself and my family was a lie. The next day, I went back while they were at work and packed enough clothes and personal items to last a few weeks. Emma said I could stay with her as long as I needed. I left a note telling them not to contact me because I needed time to process everything. Then I blocked their numbers and all social media contact. It's been a month now and I'm still staying at Emma's place. My parents have tried reaching me through other relatives, but I've blocked them all too. I just can't face them right now. How do you forgive 28 years of lies? How do you look at the people who raised you and see anything but betrayal? My whole identity feels like it was built on a foundation of lies. Emma thinks I'm being too harsh and should at least hear them out. She says they must have had their reasons and they did give me a good life. But I don't care about their reasons anymore. They had 28 years to tell me the truth and chose to lie instead. They robbed me of the chance to know my biological mother and any medical history I might need. They manipulated and controlled my entire life to suit their own fears and insecurities. Am I overreacting? Should I give them a chance to explain? Right now, I just feel lost and betrayed, and I don't know what to do next. Update 1. After my last post, I spent several days reading through all the adoption paperwork I took from my parents' house. The agency was based in San Francisco, and thankfully they still existed. I was nervous about contacting them, but I needed answers. I called them last Monday and explained my situation. The agency staff were incredibly helpful once I provided all the documentation and proof of my identity. They confirmed that everything in the papers was legitimate and told me something that made my heart stop. My biological mother Maria had registered with their reunion registry over 20 years ago, hoping I would look for her someday. They said she had updated her contact information every year without fail. It took 3 days of paperwork and verification, but the agency finally arranged a meeting between us. Maria agreed to meet immediately when they contacted her. She even offered to fly to Michigan, but I insisted on going to California instead. I needed to get away from my adoptive parents' constant attempts to contact me, and something about returning to where I was born felt right. Emma came with me for support. We flew to San Francisco last week, and the agency arranged for us to meet Maria at their office. Walking into that meeting room was the most surreal moment of my life. Maria stood up when I entered, and it was like looking in a mirror. We had the same dark hair, same brown eyes, same nose, even the same way of tucking hair behind our ears. She was crying before either of us said a word. She hugged me, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I physically belonged to someone. Growing up, people always commented on how I looked nothing like my parents. Now I knew why. Maria told me her story over lunch. She was 16 when she got pregnant with me. Her parents were strict Catholics and refused to let her keep me. They sent her to live with an aunt during the pregnancy to avoid scandal. She wanted to keep me but was essentially forced into giving me up. She chose my adoptive parents because they seemed kind and promised to maintain contact through the agency. For the first 5 years, she sent letters and photos every month. The adoption agency confirmed this. She never missed a birthday or Christmas. Then suddenly, all her letters started coming back. The agency couldn't reach my adoptive parents. They had moved without leaving a forwarding address. Maria tried everything she could to maintain contact within the legal boundaries of the closed adoption, but my adoptive parents had effectively disappeared with me. The biggest shock came when she told me about my siblings. After she finished college, Maria married a man named David who fully supported her desire to find me. They had 3 kids together, Michael, 24M, James, 21M, and Sophia, 19F. David had passed away from pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. When I heard about the cancer, I felt sick. That was exactly the kind of medical history I should have known about. Maria had told all 3 of my half-siblings about me years ago. They grew up knowing they had an older sister out there somewhere. She showed me pictures of them on her phone. Michael and James looked so much like their dad, but Sophia looked just like us. It was overwhelming to suddenly have 3 siblings after being an only child my whole life. Just when things were going well, my adoptive parents somehow found out I was in California. Emma thinks they must have tracked my credit card usage. They showed up at my workplace back in Michigan, causing a huge scene when they couldn't find me. My dad was apparently yelling about ungrateful children while my mom was crying hysterically. My coworkers had to call security to escort them out. My boss called to tell me about it and was incredibly understanding when I explained everything. She gave me an extra week of emergency leave to sort things out. Their behavior only proved to me that I'd made the right decision cutting contact. They weren't sorry for lying, they were just sorry they got caught. Even now, they were only thinking about their own feelings, not how their actions affected me. They didn't care that they were embarrassing me at work or causing me problems. They just wanted control back. Maria invited me to come stay with her for a few days to meet my siblings. I agreed but insisted on getting a hotel room nearby. It felt too overwhelming to stay in her house right away. Emma had to fly back for work, but she made me promise to call her every day. Meeting my siblings was intense but amazing. Michael is a software engineer and reminds me so much of myself and how he analyzes everything. James is in college studying marine biology and has the same weird sense of humor I do. Sophia is still in high school but she's like a mini-me in personality and looks. They were also welcoming and excited to meet me. The most painful part was going through old family photos at Maria's house. She had kept photos of my siblings at every age and it hurt to see all the moments I missed. But what really broke me was finding out that she had kept a photo album just for me, filled with all the school pictures and update letters my adoptive parents had sent during those first 5 years. She had treasured those few glimpses into my life while my adoptive parents had hidden all traces of her from me. I'm heading back to Michigan tomorrow. I need to figure out what to do about my adoptive parents and their increasingly erratic behavior. But at least now I know where I came from. I have a whole new family who wants to know me, not control me. Maria gave me her mother's old recipe book and said it was always meant to be mine. It's the first thing I've ever owned that came from my biological family. I don't know what happens next, but for the first time since finding those adoption papers, I feel like I'm not alone. Update 2: Things have gotten so much worse with my adoptive parents since my last update. After I returned from California, they escalated their attempts to contact me. They started showing up randomly at Emma's apartment building, sometimes sitting in their car for hours just waiting. Emma's neighbors got so concerned about the strange car always parked outside that they called the police twice. They also kept coming to my workplace despite the previous incident with security. My boss had to threaten them with trespassing charges. They even somehow got Maria's contact information and started harassing her through phone calls and emails. The adoption agency reported them for harassment after they called the office over 30 times in 1 week demanding information about my meeting with Maria. Last week, I finally had to get a restraining order against them. The judge granted it immediately after seeing evidence of their harassment, hundreds of calls, emails from different accounts after I blocked them, messages through distant relatives, showing up at my workplace and Emma's home. The hearing was awful. My mom cried through the whole thing while my dad tried to tell the judge I was being manipulated by my biological mother. Thankfully, the judge saw through their behavior. But the worst revelation came 3 days ago. My adoptive parents' house finally sold, and they were doing final cleaning before the new owners moved in. My dad's sister Linda called me. She's the only relative I still talk to occasionally because she's been respectful of my boundaries. She helped them pack up the basement and found something disturbing. Hidden behind some old storage boxes was a large plastic tub filled with letters, cards, and photographs. They were all from Maria, sent consistently every year on my birthday and major holidays. The letters dated all the way up to my high school graduation. She had never stopped writing to me like I thought. My adoptive parents had just hidden everything. Linda sent me photos of some of the contents. There were school photos of my half-siblings with notes about how they were excited to meet their big sister someday. There were letters about family medical history, including warnings about the cancer risk from my biological father's side. Maria had even sent handmade birthday cards every year, each one saved with a little note about hoping I'd get to read them someday. My adoptive parents had stolen so much more than I realized. They didn't just hide my adoption, they actively worked to erase any trace of my biological family. All those years Maria tried to maintain a connection, tried to share important information about my siblings and medical history, and they just shoved everything in a box in the basement. I called Maria and told her about the letters. She broke down crying. She had worried for years that something had happened to me because the letters stopped being acknowledged. The adoption agency told her I was alive and well, but she couldn't understand why I never responded to any of her attempts to stay connected as I got older. Now we know, I never even knew those attempts existed. My adoptive parents tried to say they kept everything just in case I ever wanted to know about my biological family. But if that were true, why hide it all in the basement? Why not tell me about it when I found the original adoption papers? Why make up lies about Maria abandoning contact when they had a box full of proof that she never did? I've been spending more time with Maria and my half-siblings. They've been amazing through all of this. Michael even offered to help me set up security cameras at my apartment in case my adoptive parents violate the restraining order. Sophia sends me funny texts every day to cheer me up. It's strange how natural it feels with them, even though we've only known each other for a few months. Linda told me my adoptive parents are moving to Florida next month. Apparently, they finally realized I'm serious about cutting contact. Part of me feels guilty, they did raise me and give me a good life. But every time that guilt creeps in, I remember that box in the basement. I remember all the lies, the fake photos, the made-up stories. I remember them trying to make me feel crazy every time I questioned why I looked so different from them. They had nearly 3 decades to tell me the truth. Instead, they chose to lie and manipulate and control every aspect of my identity. Even now, they're not sorry for what they did, they're just sorry they got caught. If I hadn't found those adoption papers by accident, I might have gone my whole life never knowing the truth about who I am. I have an appointment with a therapist next week. Emma thinks it will help me process everything. I'm still trying to figure out who I am without the lies I was raised on. At least now I have my real family history, even if it came 28 years late. Update 3. It's been half a year since I discovered the truth about my adoption, and life has changed completely. My adoptive parents finally stopped trying to contact me after the restraining order. They sold their house and moved to Florida last month to live near my dad's sister Linda. She told me they bought a condo in a retirement community and are trying to start fresh. Part of me is relieved they're so far away now. The relationship with my biological family has grown stronger than I ever imagined possible. Maria and I talk almost every day, and my half-siblings have become a huge part of my life. Michael helped me find a better job in my field that pays more and even has an office in San Francisco, so I can transfer there if I want to be closer to them. James sends me weird marine biology facts every morning. Apparently it's a tradition he has with all his siblings. Sophia and I have weekly video chat sessions where we just talk about life, and it's amazing how similar we are despite growing up apart. I got married last month to my long-term boyfriend Tom. We had been planning a big wedding for next year, but after everything that happened, we decided to have a smaller celebration sooner. Maria walked me down the aisle, which felt absolutely right. My half-siblings were all part of the wedding party. Sophia was my maid of honor, and watching her give her speech about finally having her big sister in her life made everyone cry. The hardest part was not having my adoptive parents there. Despite everything, they raised me for 28 years. But I couldn't have them there, not after everything they did. Linda came to represent their side of the family, and she understood why her brother and sister-in-law weren't invited. She brought me my grandmother's old pearl necklace as a wedding gift, saying regardless of biology, I was still her niece. Maria gave me a gift that broke me down completely. She had made a photo album of my life from all those letters and photos she'd sent over the years, the ones my adoptive parents had hidden in their basement. She had kept copies of everything. Seeing those photos side by side with photos of my siblings at the same ages was surreal. There was no denying we were family. Some days I still feel sad about losing my relationship with my adoptive parents. They weren't awful people, they gave me a good life and I know they loved me in their own way. But their love was possessive and controlling. They let their own insecurities and fears destroy our relationship. Instead of trusting that I could love both them and my biological family, they chose to build a wall of lies that eventually came crashing down. I've stopped going to therapy because I feel like I've processed most of my anger now. I'm not angry anymore, just disappointed. They had so many chances to tell me the truth, but they chose lies every single time. Even when confronted with evidence, they tried to justify their actions instead of apologizing. Tom and I are talking about starting our own family soon. Maria has been amazing, sharing all our family's medical history and helping me understand where I came from. It's a relief to finally know about the cancer risk from my biological father's side, information my adoptive parents kept from me out of selfishness. I don't regret cutting contact with my adoptive parents. They made their choices for 28 years and now I'm making mine. I have a wonderful new family who loves me unconditionally and accepts me for who I am. I have a husband who supported me through all of this chaos. I finally know who I really am and where I came from. Sometimes the truth hurts, but living a lie hurts more. This will be my last update. It's time to close this chapter and focus on building my new life, one based on truth and real love, not lies and control.